Okay, so today we'll be looking at how I created this sketchbook here. This sketchbook is actually a specialty sketchbook. I'm thinking of using it for a art challenge, so let's get into it. I have speed this up about 2 times for us to see basically what I do. The first thing I do is I measure out the paper I want to use. Now I am using the Canson XL paper. You saw me marked it. I put F to indicate which part of the paper is the front. And now you're seeing me cutting it down to size. I usually score it using my scoring board here. And this is such a useful tool right now in my sketchbook that I use it all the time whenever I'm making sketchbook. And I'm basically scoring this Canson XL paper at 5 inches and then 5.5 inches. So my my horizontal line, I should say, my vertical line is actually 5.5 inches, and the horizontal line, the size of the book, is 5 inches by 5.5, made from Canson XL watercolor paper. And then I go over each score line with a pencil, and that indicates where I cut it. Now you'll see me do this several times where I use alcohol rubs to wipe my hand off, so it kind of remove some of the oils and the grease from my hands, so it don't necessarily transfer to paper, because I need to wash my hands like every minute to do that. But just to keep my hands oil free, I just use the alcohol rubs. And now you see me now going back there with the score lines, trying to get my where I'm going to, how the pages are going to fold, where I'm gonna cut, indicate the parts I'm gonna cut. I usually use the pencil just so I could see it better. I erase whatever discolorations or any marks that the paper may have had, and I will be continuing scoring this process. This is really not as long as you think. And I think the second thing you'll see me do is start scoring for the cover of the sketchbook. I usually like to get this started too because of the gluing that is needed for this. Sometimes you'll need time for the glue to set before start working with it, so I like to get that out of the way as well. Again, scoring this 5 inches by 5.5 inches for this specialty sketchbook. Like I said, I'm thinking of doing an art challenge, so I'm making a special sketchbook for the art challenge, and I want to use cellulose paper. After here, I think after this, I'll go in now and start cutting the papers. Now I'm cutting it at the 5-inch mark, so when it folds, the 5.5 is going to be on its spine. I'm doing this for every single sheet of the Canson XL paper. I have the 11 by 15 inches, and that makes it 11 by 15 inches, and that makes it easier to score it equally. And I think also you see me going in there and also prepare the cover. Now I'm using a box, as you can see, an old box. And I didn't want to expose the label, so I try as much as possible to keep it on its inside, because it does have a label on its other side. And all these pieces I'm actually going to keep. I'm going to throw away the little ones that you don't see me use. As you see me there again, just removing whatever excess oils from my hand, because whenever I work with metals, I notice that my hands get a bit oily after that. And basically getting the thread ready. Now I already have thread and needles there. I was trying to figure out if I wanted to add anything to the sketchbook, but then I said, you know what? No, it's just a standard specialty sketchbook for an art challenge. I just want to keep it nice and simple, so I'm not adding anything much to it. And I'm actually removing the things that I don't need, and I'm using the thread. Now I'm unwielding here the thread, and maybe this is going to be enough for me, so I don't think I might need to, but I'm keeping the thread to one side just in the event I might need to rethread the needle. And you can see me using a bone folder to bend and give a nice clean crease to those pages. And this is where I decide how I'm gonna put the sutures together, where I'm gonna either put a page within a page or just use one fold per suture. And I decided to go with one fold per suture because the Canson XL watercolor paper was like a little bit thick for me, and I didn't want to go through the hassle of doing a fold within a fold. So to create these sutures, I think for this I created 9 sutures, and because it was just basically a single fold suture, and this is going to indicate where I'm going to sew those pages. I think one page came out cut kind of badly, but that's okay. Now I'm putting the sutures together, keeping the crease line towards me, because that is very, very important in this part of the sketchbook making process for me. And I'm trying to make sure they're all equal and all even. And again, it is very important at this stage of the sketchbook. I'm using a clamp pin or paper holder, a clamp paper holder, to keep those together. And then you'll see me, well, I use 2 apparently to keep those together. And then you'll see me use a ruler to measure it off. Now see, I measured, it's at 5 inches. And then I'm going to mark some lines with a pencil. I'm going to be marking 3 lines basically with a pencil. I'm going to mark it at 1 inch apart and then find the middle, and as you can see there, and then I mark it at an inch. And now I'm going to make my holes. Now generally I don't use punchers to make holes. I use my blade to make holes, but I'm very careful not to cut myself. And I just basically cut along the marks that I make. And this is actually like a guide for me because I like to keep things within a straight line. So whenever I see that, I know exactly how my holes lined up. But be careful if you're using this method again, guys, please be careful you don't cut yourself. And you don't cut straight through the paper, you just cut through about 1 millimeter. I'm removing my clamps, my paper clamps, and now I'm starting with the suture, the sewing part of these sutures. And as you can see, I start from the outside and I go in. I don't remember if I put this part in where I actually tied this thread together, because I like to tie my thread together. Oh yeah, I did. I did put the part in where I tied my thread together. And then I'll continue the suturing. I'm trying to do this, guys, in one take, and I see the amount of minutes I'll have to talk for, so you have to excuse me if my voice starts breaking up a bit, because this was about an hour long and I kind of speed it up, so it's about 27 minutes long. As you can see me now coming from outside inside into the next hole. Now when I slit the little cuts with that, I can barely see it, but it's good enough for me to see it. And then I go now in showing you guys now how I do it. I put each suture together, I clamp it with the paper clamp, and then I start the suturing from the outside into the next suture, and I continue from there. Now it's only 3 holes, so it would be easy enough. I go under the part that I made from the outside where I tied the string together, and then I come out and then I put the other suture attached, going under so that the sutures could stay together. And then I put another suture using the paper clamp to assist me in keeping those sutures together, because I like my binding to be very, very tight, and so I like to keep everything together. As you see, again, coming from the outside, going in. Now I'll be repeating this process for a while, so I'm gonna be quiet, rest my voice for a bit, and let you enjoy this till we get to the other part. Okay, I think at this stage I started to measure how big my spine is going to be so that I could start working on the cover. Normally I like to stop just before I reach the last two suture in. That way I give my glue enough time to set. And this is exactly what I'm doing. I'm measuring now my cover, trying to see how far apart I want my spine to be. It is about 1 centimeter, so I'm using the centimeter rule. So I'm going to push the spine just about 1.5 centimeters away so that I give the spine enough space to fold as well. And as you can see, I'm using those little pieces that I cut away to use as the spine itself. What I'm using right now is my cutting mat so that I can stick my spine onto that, and it will help me in gauging the part of my book that I want my spine to be. As you can see, I'm just trying to ensure that everything now is equal. I'm using an extra layer of thickness there at the actual spine to kind of thicken it, so I'm putting both of those together. And as you can see, I'm using low tack tape to kind of to keep those covers from moving, because I really need that to be at least precisely. You can't make your spine too big and you can't make it too small. It has to be very precise. And to make it precise, I just like to make sure I tape my covers down to ensure that I use my cutting mat because that has a centimeter rule, and I know exactly when I put that there where the centimeter lies. And as you can see now, I'm actually trimming the piece I'm going to use for the spine. What you're not seeing there is me actually marking it with my finger where I need to cut. Instead of using a pencil or bone folder, I just use my fingernails to kind of mark it a bit where I want to cut, because it's just a little marking I need and I didn't need to just pull out a tool for that. And now you see me here trimming down it to about 1 centimeter. It was a bit too big using that cutter, so I need to cut the rest with the scissors. And that's what I'm doing. I put the scissors down, and again I measure within that where my spine's gonna be. It was a bit too long, and then I measure within that. Because I'm trying to keep my labelings of the cover concealed, I'm going to be using construction tape to put on the side of the cover that you're seeing, so that when I do put on the cover, it doesn't transfer or anything goes from the other side. And the same rule applies. I'm pulling out my scoring tool and I'm measuring 5.5 by 5 centimeters, and I use both my scoring tool and the pencil to kind of mark how that goes. And then I think for this I actually use a scissors to cut it because I didn't want to pull out the guillotine cutter to cut the construction paper, because sometimes I notice when I use guillotine cutters to cut construction paper, it doesn't cut it properly. There's mistakes and mishap. So something, the construction paper that I have is a bit too soft, so I prefer to cut it with a scissors versus a guillotine cutter. And if I use a guillotine cutter to cut it, I usually double it, and you'll also see that in this video. Now what I'm doing next is I'm actually gluing the construction paper onto the covers to kind of to straighten it a bit, so that I can stiffen it a bit and at the same time conceal the ghosting that would have been caused by the labeling of the covers, because I'm just using a box that I got. Just a normal box that they would have thrown away. I took it and I brought it home, and that's what I'm using for my sketchbook cover here. So I'm gluing it with normal paper glue, nothing fancy. You know, I don't have anything fancy here in Belize, so it's just basically normal paper glue. I'm using a palette knife to kind of spread the glue around a bit and then glue that on. And I do this in the middle of my binding process because it gives the glue time to set. So I don't have to be waiting on this process. So while I'm binding, the glue is setting on this, that by the time I finish binding, I could just continue along with the process, and it makes it a whole lot easier. And that's what I'm doing, making sure everything is precise. It flows well. There's not a big waiting time. And you'll see me put on the second part to this cover now. And I think here I used a bone folder to kind of smooth everything out so that there's no lumps in the glue of the construction paper onto the cover. And now I'm continuing and finishing up my binding process. Those last two sutures, I am finishing them up, binding them together. And please ensure, binding is more of a technique routine kind of skill. So once you find your technique, you just stick to that routine. You can listen to some music, you can watch a podcast, or binge on a series. This was about an hour, so this was only like one show for me. And but I really wasn't listening to anything. I was just enjoying doing this for this moment, binding those last two together. And you'll see how I finish it off here on the end. I actually tied the thread here a couple times so that I can ensure it stays. I use my fingernails because I like to loop my thread together, but again, that's just a stylistic choice. You don't have to. It's just easier for me to do it, so I like to tie my thread together, at least one part of my thread. And there you see me now going under, over, and this is where I start my tying process. So I have to be cognizant of this last suture, that's medical term, this last sewing I'm doing, or this last binding I'm doing. You have to excuse me sometimes, because in medicine, suturing is the actual sewing of the skin, and in bookbinding, suturing is the actual two folds that you put together. So I know the last time I did this thing, I got it confused. But here you see me now doing the tying of the binding, just trying to make sure that the thread doesn't loose at all. But I am not too I'm not too keen on the tying. I could just do it a couple times, because I'm going to glue all this together anyway when I put on the cover. So I just want to make sure that it just stays nice and tight. So I'm just doing it for about a couple times, and then I'm going to leave it, and then I'm going to work on the cover while I'm doing this. I believe I started work on the cover here. Yeah. Cut this off, and then yeah, there's the book all bind up. Now I have to put on the cover. So here now, the cover, making sure the glue is set on the cover. The cover was a bit too big for it, so I'm trimming it down a bit. Don't have to worry, oh shoot, the label, that it is down, and then trim that off. Those pieces I could get rid of. Now here I have two pieces of construction paper together, and I'm just folding those. It's actually two pieces I'm folding because I want to use the guillotine cutter with those. So I put two together, and I'm measuring them 5.5 inches by 5 inches. And then I'm gonna cut those in the guillotine folder, in the guillotine cutter, so that I could use those as my innards for the book. And again, that's what you're seeing me doing there. Cut those. I don't think I'll use those pieces, like the little strips, so I put those aside. The bigger pieces I kept, and as you can see, yeah, those are my innards, and that's how I put it together. Now the next part of it is I'm using the other construction paper that I cut off, and I'm going to be gluing that together. Yeah, this is how I use my glue, guys. I use it till the very end. So the stick glue, once it's finished, I basically dig it out, and I use my palette knife to kind of spread it, because it is still good. It's still good glue. It's not finished, you know, so I dig it out. You have to use every bit of the glue. You know, we're not rich people here, you know, so we have to use every bit of the glue. And this is how I do it. Use a palette knife to spread it out. It's a bit sticky because I'm using just normal paper glue, and I'm putting it together. I use my bone folder here to kind of spread it evenly. And then the next thing I'm going to do is, I think I'm going to measure it with the spine of the book, because this is going to be the part that is going to cover or glue the spine of the book together. So this is what I'm going to do. Yeah, I'm measuring it there, put it on there, see how far I want it, measure it, and then I'm going to crease the piece I just glued together, crease it over the spine of the book, and then I am going to score it for the crease to hold. So it's like marking it. See, that's what I'm doing. I mark it and then I score it with the bone folder. And I'm not sure if I show the process where I actually just bend it. Yes, I did. And with the bone folder to make sure those crease holds. And then I'm gonna put glue into that. And that's where I glue my book, covering the spine of the book. And I double that piece of construction paper because I need that to be very strong. Not necessarily rigid, but strong. So I have the folded innards on either end, and then I fold that over with the glue in it, making sure that everything stays. I think I'm using a paper clamp to assist me in holding things together. Yeah. And then I tap it on the surface of my table, and then I'm going to put a paper clamp over that, several paper clamps actually, and to hold it together and allow that glue now to set, because it's important for that glue to set. And after putting that together, I'm going to put that aside, and then I'm going to work on the actual cover of the book. Now I use decorative duct tape, but I didn't want to show you guys the label of this cover. I'm very mindful of that. Sorry if I showed it before. And then I'm just going to cut that part of it off, and that's the actual outside of the book. And then I'm using my bone folder now to kind of crease where that spine is going to be, so that the spine of the book starting to bend. The bending of the spine is very important because it helps with the opening of the book. So I like to fashion that. And because I use duct tape, what I did is to use another pieces that I cut off to kind of put on the inner side, so that it lessens the stickiness of the duct tape. So when it bends, it's not as sticky. Sometimes I just use toilet paper, but this time I had some duct tape left over, so I just used the duct tape. But again, I have to be mindful to, when I do that, to ensure that it maintains the bendiness. So I again go over it with the bone folder to kind of create that crease into the spine of the book, so it assists it with its bending. And then the other process, the one you didn't see me here, is I put back the book together, and I'm just using again normal paper glue, and I'm gluing the other side of the cover, so that when I glue the innards, the book together, it's just the innards that I put on the construction paper on either side of the book. And I'm spreading that now out with my palette knife, just to make sure the glue is nice and even, and it doesn't create too much creases in the book. And again, normal paper glue, that's what I use to hold my book together. I'm not really keen on archivalness because I'm not selling these books. It's just for me. No glue on the spine, and then I'm going to fold one end onto the other. I think I'm going to be using my bone folder in this part of it to kind of even the glue out, so I reduce on the amount of wrinkles in that part of the book, and open it up, making sure that it, to reduce it. And then I think after this process, I give it a couple minutes for the glue to set, and then I start to condition the spine, because you really do have to condition your spine in bending, so that when you open your book, it opens nice and flat, or how you want your book to open. So I'm looking at the pages. Some of them were glued together when the spine was glued together, but the glue was still a bit wet. Here am I just writing the paper weight and I think the paper weight and the number of paper that I use in making the book, the paper weight and the amount of pages the book have. I normally do that on a little tag to the back of the book, and then I glue that on into the back of the book so I could remember what I made this paper out of. And that's what you see me doing there. And I stick that tag into the back of the book, so that when I open that book and I talk to you about it, I know exactly what paper I made it off. And here you see me now conditioning the book, bending those spine together, trying to ensure that the spine stays bending, ensuring that I condition that spine, and we're done. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. And as always, stay safe, stay blessed, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.